Hey guys, welcome back to Charity Tries New Stuff That Takes Forever. This week, to celebrate the new Detective Pikachu movie, I decided to make Charizard. He's not the Charizard from the movie, but he is the Charizard from my childhood nostalgia, so I decided to give him a go. He was a little bit hard, I'm not gonna lie, but let's get right into it. I've made myself a template of Charizard, and I will link the one that I used below. I scaled it up to fit comfortably on this 14-inch board, and where his 2 feet rest, like in the center-ish of the board, I'm marking 2 dots. I'm using a couple pieces of threaded rod today, so I made 2 holes in the boards where I marked where his feet were to be the same size as my threaded rod. I hot glued some pieces of wood to the bottom of my board to give it a little bit of height, but you can find cake boards that already have little feet on them. I pushed 2 of these shorter threaded rods through the hole and then secured it in place with a nut on the bottom and on top, just making sure that it's really snug and tight so it's not going to wiggle around. I wanted the rods just to be a smidge higher than the lowest point of his tummy, and I put 2 nuts on either side and just twisted them a little bit of the ways down. I cut out 2 of these like lemony / Stewie's head from Family Guy shapes, and I marked in 2 holes on either side for the threaded rods, as well as a hole in the very center, and I did that on the other cake board as well. I pushed them down onto the threaded rod and then secured both those in place with a nut, again just tightening it really firm so the boards don't move at all. I added another longer threaded rod through the center, and I measured this so that it would go up almost to the top of Charizard's head. I secured the bottom with a nut and then another nut on top. So this is what the structure looked like when I was all done, and even though I sanitized all of the metal pieces, it's still not food safe, so I'm taking some foil and just really tightly wrapping around all of the metal. So now I'm going to start on my cakes. I have some 6-inch vanilla cakes that I'm going to be stacking up with some chocolate ganache. As I worked my way up, I added some 4-inch cakes. The main part of his body is basically like a teardrop shape, so I just went off of my reference photo to get an idea of how high I needed to make it. When I was pretty sure I had enough height on there, I grabbed my template and started to carve out the shape of his body, just using it as a guide. And when I was finished carving, it looked like this. I took all of my vanilla offcuts with my chocolate ganache and mixed them together in a bowl until I had a nice consistency cake pop dough, not too soft, not too firm, and I'm going to use this to help me shape the legs as well as the bottom of the cake. I added some of that mixture underneath the board to round out the bottom of the cake. If you need help sticking, just add a little bit of ganache to the bottom of the board and that should keep everything in place. I added some melted chocolate around the foil just to add another barrier, and then I started to shape the leg based off of my reference photo. You could also use Rice Krispies to shape the limbs, but I just wanted to make this as much cake as possible, but use whatever medium you feel comfortable with. So once I was done, it looked like this. I popped it in the fridge just to give the cake pop mixture time to firm up, and then added a thin layer of ganache all over the entire thing to lock in any crumbs. Once my ganache had set, I started to shape the tail. Just the main part of the tail, I'm going to create the rest of it with modeling chocolate, so if it looks a little bit stubby, that's why. Also, apologies for the roller coaster lighting in this video. This cake took me a very long time, so I was basically starting from like sunrise to sunset. I also built out the front a bit more and then connected that at the bottom. So I carried on that cake pop mixture all the way around so that it kind of lined up with the tail at the back. This is me trying to show you, and it's not really working out. I ganached the tail and front, and then once that had set, I added another layer of ganache over the whole thing, and I wanted to get this as smooth as I could. I used my small spatula and also a piece of cardstock just so I could curve around the cake. You could also use a piece of acetate if that works better for you. I'm using my Main Man modeling chocolate for this cake, so I'm brushing the whole thing with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to start paneling my modeling chocolate. I've already dyed it orange, and I'm going to link the recipe that I used below. I made this myself, and I'm adding it in pieces to my cake, and then using my modeling tools just to blend the seams together as I go. When I had the whole thing pretty much covered, it looked like this. There was a couple of rough spots, a couple of spots I missed, but I did go back throughout making the cake and just adding pieces, smoothing them down. There was a little more detail to add, so I wasn't worried about it looking perfect at this stage. You can see I brought my modeling chocolate almost all the way up to the top of my threaded rod, but I've left a little bit of space there for a nut and another small piece of cake board. This is just going to help me support the head. I added a ball of modeling chocolate on the top of my cake board, and I added another piece of modeling chocolate just to blend down the neck. You can see this little fondant rolling tool is the best thing I've found to help me blend out the modeling chocolate together. There's all sorts of things that you can buy, but this was really handy for me, and I used it the most in this process. The ball at the top was probably the size of an orange, and I'm going to start building up the facial features. So I started to layer on the modeling chocolate, letting it firm up a bit and then moving it around. It's best to use gloves while you're doing this versus just your fingers, because the heat of your hands makes it like a little bit weird, so the gloves is a nice barrier. And it's kind of hard to talk you through the actual steps of what I'm doing, so I'm hoping just from watching me you're going to get an idea of how I did everything. He's like roaring up at the sky angrily, so his mouth is open. So that's what I'm doing right here, building up the top and the bottom. I know it basically looks hilarious right up until I finish. The whole time his mouth just looks weird. So I'm adding some pieces, and then once it firmed up, building it out. This is great because you didn't really have to use any internal supports. Modeling chocolate dries really firm, so I was able to create this open mouth look, and I didn't have to use any skewers or dried spaghetti or anything like that. Once I had the main shape of his head down, I started to add pieces around the mouth just to give it a little more depth so it wasn't super flat. I used my balling tool and this little measuring spoon to help me hollow out the mouth a little bit, so there was a bit of a lip around the edge. And while I gave that a chance just to firm up a little bit before I moved on, I added on to my tail. You can see I've just added this long tapered sausage shape, and I've curled it up at the end, and I'm just blending that into the base of the tail that's already on the cake. Moving back to the head, I did do one side just to give myself an idea of what I'm doing. So I am going to show you how I did the other side. But I have this really dark red color, and I'm going to fill that in the mouth, just making sure it's not moving over onto the edge of the lip at all. I added a flat, tapered-ish teardrop shape for the tongue, and I blended the fatter part into the very crook of his mouth there. And if you blend it in, it does stay pretty firm, so I was able to keep it so it was like not resting against the base of his mouth. I added this teardrop shape of white for the eye, and then I'm going to add some sausage shapes of that orange modeling chocolate below and above, just blending the bottom out into the head. He has like these two spike things. I don't know if they're his ears or if they're just spikes, so don't quote me on that, on the top of his head, and they kind of blend into the brow bone. So I've rolled out this long tapered shape and then just try to line it up with like where the brow would carry on down the back of the head, if that makes any sense at all. I filled out his cheek a little bit and tried to define the jaw area. And then I used a piping tip to punch out a circle of blue modeling chocolate that I just cut the top off of, and I fit that in place. I added some black in the center for a pupil, and then with some royal blue food coloring, I'm just lining the outer edge of that blue modeling chocolate and dragging the color into the center. Then to finish it off, just a little oval of white for the catchlight. I added his teeth. He has 2 up top and 2 at the bottom. My modeling chocolate was just sticking together really nicely, but if you need a little extra help, you can use some water. For his tummy, I've rolled out some really pale yellow fondant, and I've just put that over the front, and then once it was on there, I gently trimmed away this oval shape that I wanted. I made sure not to cut too deep so that I was cutting through the orange, just through the yellow, and just trimming it away piece by piece until I had the shape that I wanted, just making sure it tucked underneath the cake as well. I did the arms in stages, so I started out by inserting a wooden skewer at a downward angle, and then I'm attaching a ball of that orange modeling chocolate for the shoulder area and just gently blending that into the cake. I added a thick sausage shape of orange modeling chocolate attached to that shoulder, and then just built it up and let it dry before I added like the elbow and the forearm part. Once it was really firm, I inserted another wooden skewer going outward and then built up the arm and added a little ball of the modeling chocolate on the end of that and just tried to blend everything together. I know it looks really brutal right now, but I did go back and smooth this all out after. When each arm was completely firm, I added 3 balls on either end and then blended them down, and these are going to be like his fingers. To make each wing, I have a template, again, just based off of my reference photo that I've linked below, and I'm rolling out some orange modeling chocolate. I find the best way to roll this stuff out is to sandwich it between 2 pieces of parchment paper, and then that way it doesn't stick to your rolling pin or your work surface. And when the piece was big enough, I cut out that shape with my X-Acto knife. I made sure I did 2 of these bad boys. With my soft tip fondant tool, I'm just outlining the very outer edge of that wing all the way around, excluding the bottom. I rolled out a long snaky of this darker blue modeling chocolate and just ran that down the very center of the wing and just blended the edges down into the orange with my fondant tool. I rolled out more of that blue modeling chocolate, and I'm using this for the very center of the wing, just making sure that I leave that orange rim all the way around the top, and I smoothed it around that modeling chocolate snaky in the center as well. To attach them, I'm adding some melted chocolate, and I let them firm up almost all the way, not completely hard. I want to make sure they have a little bit of movability, and I'm pressing that to the back of the cake and just holding it there so that the chocolate can firm up. I know you can't see my face here, but the very tip of that wing broke off and a little tear just squeezed out because this was literally like a million into this cake, and I was so done. I loved it, but I was so done at this point. Once the chocolate had hardened, I did add more modeling chocolate to the back of my cake and blended that over the wings, just so it wasn't going anywhere because I was really paranoid they were going to slip off. I covered my board in fondant, and I'm going to add the white claws on the feet as well as the hands. As a final step, I mixed together some red, orange, and yellow modeling chocolate and formed it into this fillet type teardrop shape and just attached that to the very tip of his tail. And this was the final result, guys. I absolutely loved him. I'm super proud. I love modeling chocolate. I'm so excited to keep on experimenting and getting better and better with it. I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.